ready? Online. Tēnā koutou katoa, he mihi atu kia koutou, mo tēnei hui. Welcome everybody, for those people that are online, to the Policy and Planning hui today. I just want to acknowledge the councillors that sit in this, sit as part of the committee for being here today. Also mention to Fidel Getty, who's sitting in with us today, to our staff, a mihi out to everybody, His Worship the Mayor, and also Peter, thank you. And I'm sure we're going to have a very good meeting today. There's a number of topics for us to get through. So we don't need to have the prayer. We have done our prayer this morning already. So we're going to go straight into number 2, which was apologies, which we have no apologies have been received. So we can move straight past that. A public forum, we don't have anybody that's come up for public forum, so that's another tick. We can move past that. Conflict of interest declarations, for all of the committee members are aware, if they have any conflicts, they can declare it now, or else once we get into those different kaupapa, if you're able to put that forward, that would be great. We all understand that. So, happy to move forward. Okay, so we're happy to go through and have the confirmation of order of business.
As it stands on the agenda.
Okay, so we've got a recommendation that I'm taking that everybody has read the previous minutes. Oh, we haven't got to the edge, have we? That's not, sorry, I'm going too fast for myself. But I can go through. So is there anything that anyone would like to bring up in regards to the confirmation of order of business? Or are we happy to move past that? Yep, ka pai. So 6, confirmation of minutes. And I feel like everyone is pretty much, apart from you, Greg, that wasn't at the last meeting, we're around the hui. So just a recommendation that the minutes be taken as read and verified as accurate and correct record of the meeting. A mover and a seconder, please.
I just have one question on page 9.
Page 9.
8, under 8, reports for decision. That's part of the last minutes, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm just not sure what is meant by that first sentence. Ms. Gray took us through the stating, etc. The last piece of that, I just wonder if I could have clarity on that, as well as the simplicity and clarity. I don't really know what that means.
Thank you. That's great.
Yes, I can probably confirm some of the edits we did to the local governance statement was to review, to make it simpler and clearer, so that there were some amendments associated with it that were focused on increasing the simplicity and clarity of the document.
So I think further to that, it means that there were updates to make the document simple and clear.
So would you put of the document in that sentence to make that clearer? Or everyone else understood that except me? Okay, fine, thank you.
Sure, we're going to go carry on with any of the other things that have come up within the minutes. We're still on the minutes. I'm happy to move the minutes. Can I have a second, please? Councillor Duncan. All in favour, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Chair's report. I would like to tell you that I'm giving you a verbal chair's report. Given that we haven't actually had a hui since March, so that's quite a few months have passed, and now I'm going to come to you with some excuses, but actually just to say that I haven't got a written report, but what I would like to say in regards to this committee is that from the last meeting, I understand that there's still some work to be done around how we can make the committee and everything in it more effective and efficient. And I feel there's still going to be, we are still working on how we can streamline things within it. As far as what's in the meeting agenda today, there's a number of policies that we'll be going through. So just thank you for everyone's contribution once we get to it. That is my very short report. So recommendation that my verbal report be received. Councillor Moore, seconded Councillor Wilson. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Kia ora. Right. So, we're going to move straight on to reports for decision. Right, who's going to lead us in this, please? Georgia. Kia ora, Georgia.
Thank you. So if I can take the report as read, I'll just go through sort of a few highlights. So this report is updating you all on the policies and the bylaws that council holds and when those are due for review, as well as which ones we're sort of proposing to get started on first. As you can see from the attachments, there's a pretty big table there, 12 bylaws and 33 documents listed as policies. And the difference being in more detail in the report, but basically bylaws are council telling the community what they can or can't do, and policies is council saying how are we going to make certain decisions, and when people make applications, what are we going to do about them in some cases. Some of those are required under legislation, and some of them council has chosen to create to support that decision making or improve transparency. What we have planned for this year based on what is due, firstly is the speed limits bylaw. That one, the government has said it's not controlled by a bylaw anymore, it's controlled by the speed management plan. In the last CE report, there was an update on the speed management plan and how that's going to progress. But council's no longer supposed to have a bylaw about it and is allowed to revoke it without any consultation. So one of our recommendations is just to revoke that bylaw.
So, does that mean it's written completely off the, like it's not put to sleep, it's gone?
Yeah, so we would take it down because it's now in a national speed limits register is where the information's held, and the plan is how the decisions are made, so the bylaw is just not needed anymore.
Yeah. So, like, supplementary question, if there's a change in government and they decide to do we have to start all over again?
I would think so, but I'd be quite surprised if they decided to bring back the speed limit bylaw as opposed to the other.
Thank you, Georgia. Anyone else? So has anyone else got any questions specifically around the speed limit bylaw? Any revocation of that? All right. Is there anything else you'd like to
The rest of the report is more information about what is in the program going forward, but I'll go through that as well. So there's quite a few things to be done in this year. So we've got the 3 bylaws that need to be reviewed or else they'll lapse and no longer be enforceable. That's public places, control of advertising, signage and trading in public places. They have to be reviewed and adopted by the 30th of September 2024. We're starting to have a look at those, what's working, if there's anything that needs to be changed. There's been, happens to have been a request from the community recently, so we'll be back to you with more information on those as we go through. Then there are also the TAB venues policy and the gambling venues policy. Council is required to hold those and they are required to be reviewed. Then also the procurement policy, treasury management policy, and the delegations register sort of under development. That's the policy on delegations has recently been adopted. But then also for the long-term plan, there's the statement on development of Māori capacity to contribute to decision making, long sentence, and the significance and engagement policy. We also wanted to update the Mokai Bridge bungee jumping bylaw. It's technically due for review, but in the moment it's in a bit of limbo because of that property and what's going on there. It's kind of hard to make a recommendation of what to do with it until that progresses a bit further. So we're suggesting that we delay that review until there's a bit more clarity. And that's the summary of everything that's on the cards, and we do note that quite a lot going on. So while we do have other requests from time to time on other policies, there's kind of limited capacity to those to the program.
Yeah.
Yes, in terms of the work plan going forward, I note that the smoking, vaping bylaw that we have listed as having no capacity. When we went to last local government conference, we were one of, I think, 8 councils that didn't have a smoking policy. And I suspect that we'll be one of 1, the next one. It would be really nice if we said that we are doing something about it, even if we adopt somebody else's policy. They are reasonably generic. And I know the vaping one will be a little bit more difficult, but there's a whole lot of ones that are really simple in terms of, you should be smoking in, parks and places. And I think when I went to their stand, because they will have another stand again this year, and as I said, I suspect we will be one of 1 council that hasn't done anything about it. And I think it's important.
Before we come, I feel like we're going to get some feedback from yourself, but can we go to Councillor Moore first, please?
Yeah, on the same topic, I thought the smoking and vaping one would be covered by government policy.
Each authority has tended to have their own. There are some rules that are government laws and just been put in place. You're not allowed to have vaping establishments now within 300 metres of schools and so on. So there are laws.
Like smoking in a public park or something, that's a council.
Thank you.
Thank you. Clarification.
Thank you. Gray, did you have a response?
Thank you. Yes, so thank you, Your Worship, and Madam Chair. The useful feedback from this committee will be how much of a priority is this over the other programs of work that are in our work program. I think we can fast track it if you do want us to fast track it, but it will be potentially at the expense of something else. Our work program is incredibly tight for the policy and bylaw review. So if we are to jump this one ahead of something else, then it will have an impact, and it would be useful to have guidance from you where you would like to see that impact, whether it's in the bylaw review, the TAB venue policies review. It probably can't be in that LTP policy space. And then the other thing I think probably would be useful for this committee to consider is having a smoke-free policy, what the other implications might be. Could there be signage that we need? I know some councils have outdoor seating in their kind of smoke-free policies, and they have little logos that they put up. So just thinking about what any consequential requirements might be, but happy to take the committee's direction.
Thank you for that. I'd like to go around the room to just see if we can get some feedback from committee members about this kaupapa, please. And we're going to start with you.
Oh, right, yeah. Yes, no, I agree. If it's not a pressing policy, I can't see, like, if we're not getting any, council's getting any pushback about it, I can't see it. But if, as Andy indicates, there's a generic policy, we could do a cut and paste, well, maybe that could suffice. That's more.
Councillor Moore?
Yeah, I don't think it's high priority, given that there is plenty of legislation to stop people smoking in pubs and all that, in buildings and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Sorry, can I just can you just clarify? It's high priority, so it's something.
No, for that is actual council action at this stage, given comments from.
Okay. Councillor Delgado?
In view of the legislation smoke-free by 2025, I think it is, I think it does need to take some sort of priority. I think that certainly there's a team that was managing the stall at conference, and I'm sure they'd come and make a presentation to us. And I agree with Andy, we are likely to be the only one left in our region that hasn't addressed it. And I also agree, some policies obviously were very specific in a whole range of places, and others were very general. So we could, I'm sure, find a pretty simple something to copy and get this ticked off.
Councillor Lawson.
Yeah, just probably tending to agree a little bit with Councillor Dalgety on this, but what I'm wondering is when you're going out to consultation with a specific policy, which you will be, as you've indicated, with regards to gaming venues, which is next up, is there an ideal number of policies that you go out with at any one time? And what are the implications of going out with 2 or 3 or more policies? Is there any, or is it just staff workload, or what is the implications of it?
Can I just say that I'll give you some time to think about that and to come back, but not necessarily answer it immediately.
Thank you. I'm interested around it because I don't think there was a single submission in the annual plan process or spatial plan or anywhere about any sort of smoking in parks or from our communities. So that makes me think it's not a priority for the community at this point. And I hear the staff pressure, and but I would suggest maybe we should schedule it, maybe not for this next process, given what Ms Gray said about the workload, but we should schedule it for the next, perhaps, process, so that even though we might be the only person left standing, looking red in the face, we have got it scheduled, and so we can say, well, we're onto it as soon as we can.
Your Worship, have you got anything else you'd like to say about this? Because I've got some.
When I say that, I think there were 8, that's 8 in the entire country, and they had a huge map with literally boom, boom, boom. These are the 8 councils that haven't done anything. And when I had a talk to them, I think you might have too, they said this is, at the entry level, this is really, really simple and generic. I just think it's an embarrassment to us, to be honest.
Children, thank you for everyone's feedback. My feedback on this kaupapa is we've been put, I feel like you've given us and told us that these are the immediates that we need to be looking at. And I don't think that this at the moment, I know it's important, and I know that there's the 2025 where we're looking at smoke-free New Zealand, hopefully. But I wouldn't want that to overtake anything else that's been already put there. So we've got some kaupapa that are in there. And what I'd like you to think about, and I take on board with what Councillor Wilson has talked about, and how can this be slipped in perhaps and be done as a, in line with, so not saying no to something, but how can we make things work, and how can we do something where we stay on our business, our core business of what you put in front of us, but how can we keep ensuring and this, around the smoke-free policy, how can we get it in? Because probably the other thing I was thinking about, this is internally the organisation has a smoke-free policy for the staff. Internally it has a smoke-free policy, has to.
No, we don't.
Doesn't. Oh, that surprises me.
For buildings, yes, and vehicles, yes, but not for staff as such.
Okay. So you've heard the views of everybody around the table. So I'd like, maybe we've got our next toys in 2 months, in August. If we're not, because I don't expect you to answer that immediately, because I think that you have to be really thinking about where we're at, how can we get our BAU sorted, but how that's important. Everyone's all expressed that this is an important kaupapa, and we would like you to see how we can get it into the work. Clean, thank you. Yes.
Just because it's an action, I'll just make sure I've got it down correctly. If I may paraphrase, Madam Chair, what you've just said, which is that you would like staff to assess how to include this kaupapa into our next year's deliverables, and if there are any things that may drop off or consequences as a result of doing that.
Yeah.
Is that roughly right?
Well, what I'd like to say is, from what I've heard from the feedback from everyone, we don't want to hold up what we've got to do as our BAU, but everybody's expressed that it is an important thing.
Yes.
So I take on board that it's been noted that we don't necessarily have that at the moment, we don't have the capacity, but potentially we may be able to put it in alongside something else we're doing. So.
Yeah, we'll bring something back to the next meeting.
Excellent. Anything else that people would like to bring up in this part of it? Otherwise, we're going to go into recommendations. So just the recommendation one that we've got on the board is that, that the report be received.
Have you moved yet?
Yep, councillor Wilson, seconded councillor Maughan. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye, killed it, moved. Recommendation two, that the Policy Planning Committee recommends to council that the speed limits bylaw be revoked. And I thank you, Georgia, you gave the explanation. It's pretty much out of our hands, and it's nothing you need to be worried about anymore. So I'm happy to move that. And a seconder, please. To have that
I'll
right.
second that.
Thank you. Councillor Lambert. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Held up. Reports for information. And who's going to take us through that one? Katrina.
Can I just ask whether there's, Georgia, whether, through you, Madam Chair, whether there's a timing issue between this revocation of it and our need to have supplied them with the speed management advice for all of our roads?
Sorry, I think I missed some of that question.
So as I understand it, we now have a requirement to provide a speed management program for all of our roads. The revocation of the bylaw, that doesn't mean that we're caught without anything, does it?
No, so everything that we already had went into the National Speed Limits Register, and that's kind of the official holding point. And they said get rid of your bylaw as soon as you can, basically.
Right, cool, thank you.
Thanks.
That's great.
Right, so the purpose of this report is to start the review of our strategic framework that's going to shape our long-term plan and all of our programs of work. So the purpose of this report is to provide you with a bit of the background information around how we got to where we are, and then ask some questions to help start the thinking around the next version, I guess, of our strategic framework, noting that we'll head into a workshop type scenario as the next discussion. So effectively our 2021 long-term plan set out the strategic framework for that 10-year period. From page 10, 11 and 12, it's outlined there. We've got our purpose, we had wellbeing pillars, community outcomes, it set out our strategic direction, and then it also had our vision across the page as well. So that's what we put into our 2021 long-term plan. And then what we did during 2022 is we transformed that into a visual representation of our framework. And in doing that, we sought to represent the hierarchy of the framework, because there is a definite hierarchy. Everything should be aiming to implement what's above it. And then we also removed some duplication and some double up. So there was a little bit of double up with our community outcomes and our wellbeing pillars. We merged those into one, in the kind of core five, strategic core five, as we try and call it. The core five also lists all of council's external facing strategies and plans, and then sitting underneath all of those is our long-term plans and our annual plans, giving effect to all of that strategic direction sitting above. So as I mentioned, the strategic direction is due for review alongside our long-term plan, and we've proposed that the members of the Policy Planning Committee lead the review of that strategic framework, either A, within our policy planning meetings, or B, being really involved in any long-term plan workshops around the strategic framework. And in terms of reviewing the strategic framework, it's important to consider our purpose of local government, which is outlined in the Act, which talks about enabling democratic decision making, but more for the purposes of this one, is promoting wellbeing and the 4 aspects of wellbeing. Now, as we go through this process, it's important to consider our future strategic framework in the context of what we already know, what our context is as a district, key drivers, key challenges, what we know in terms of aspirations from our communities, And we have done some engagement already around those type of things. So I've referred you to the draft community spatial plan, the report that Impact Collective did for us, and then noted around our environmental scan that's currently under development as well. So what we've got is just a few questions to start thinking about and encourage you to discuss today or start discussing today around the existing framework. So what works well? Where are the gaps? Have you found it supported your decision making and investment decisions? Does it reflect what we already know about community aspirations for wellbeing? So quite big questions for a start off, but just to start to get the feel of where we're going to go in terms of the review.
Thank you, Ms. Gray. So just to say, as we know, that there's two opportunities for us to feed into this. One is through this process of us around the table, and we've been asked as the Policy and Planning Committee to lead things. However, we also, this kaupapa will come up again in our long-term planning workshops that are coming up. So has anyone got any thoughts just to throw out there as a starter? Actually, I might just ask His Worship the Mayor if he can, with his many years of experience, if you're able to give us some start jumping off point, and then I'm going to go to Councillor Dalhedi.
I was quite happy if you went to Councillor Dalhedi first, to be honest. Just in terms of just timing issue, in terms of the workshops, are they in the mix already?
Yes. Yep.
No. I'll go to Councillor Dalhedi first.
As a comment from me, in terms of the vision, I like the depth of there's a lot that we've tried to cover off in that vision. However, I have a feeling that a more snappy, if we could somehow capture it in a snappy few lines that our ratepayers can live by and we can all live by, that would excite me.
Thank you for that comment.
If I may, it's a really important point. We use that often when we write strategies, and I need to pick the ones that's applicable to the strategy that I'm writing. If there's just a generic bit, it's not. And it's super important because what I use this for a lot is the guy that's pushing the mower. I can show him how him pushing the mower is going to contribute to that goal. And it helps us a lot in pointing staff effort in the right direction. So although I understand where you're coming from, but it really helps us if there's a variety that we can pick from.
Thank you, that's good to understand, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Moore?
Yeah, I like this Kawhai view. I think it does obviously needs an update, like whether we have a population of 25,000 or added water there or whatever. But I think, maybe we need to pick a few key things out of it. Like I look at redevelopment of town centres in Martin and Hunterville, have some sort of a plan of how we're going to do that. I know that will probably come out a long-term plan and all that sort of stuff, but I think as a council and a staff, we should focus on, have some 2 or 3 key points on each thing in that strategic framework, how we're going to go about it, because all very well having the headline, but how we're going to do it, I guess that's yeah, I know, but I'd rather say coming out of our long-term plan, maybe we spend $1 million on the main street of Martin, something like that. Tidy it up, knock a building down, maybe.
Has any other councillors got anything they'd like to contribute in? Councillor Duncan?
Well, I look at this, I mean, it excited me from the first minute that you brought it out, and I think it's so comprehensive and great. Maybe the language could be upgraded, but it actually is so comprehensive that I struggle to see how you can change it unless you're just doing it for the sake of it in a way. I mean, it just is it's very, very good. We just need to use it more, this would be my thoughts.
Councillor Lambert?
Yeah, no, I just, thank you said that, Jill, because that's exactly how I feel, but, I mean, it's called a Ko-Fi, but it always strikes me as a 1970s tie, but, I agree, I can't really, without, just changing things for the sake of it, I take on board what Councillor Dalgety said, but, yeah, I like it as it is,
Councillor Wilson, have you got anything to contribute? Are you happy?
I like the concept, but I just would question throughout the development of our long-term plan and other such things as to some of the items that are they in actual fact achievable by council? Does council have a direct influence over them? There might be one or two that I wonder if we do. I'm very happy with the concept. I think it's a good lead document. I think it is a good focus and vision document. I look at one there and I'm just picking on it in the vision sector. Have a smoother age demographic. How much can council really actually control that? I'd wonder whether we'd pick through it, and if in looking at it, we said, yep, we can, and this is where it would fit with another strategies and policies, I'd go, great, leave it in there. Just rather than having stuff that's in there for the sake of being in there, if we're not in direct control or able to influence it, would be my only question. Great. I wouldn't want to see it changed dramatically.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Anything else to add?
I'm not being facetious or smart here, because I actually like it as it is. And I wonder if instead of doing those workshops and having staff spend on it, we could do the smoke policy. And I'm not just trying to be smart here, because I actually think this works.
Thank you.
That's why I was quite interested in just quietly listening to people's views, because when I read this, I thought,
Yes, sir.
what are you going to add to it?
Well, how can you
How are you going to gloss it and reframe it?
I know you're a big fan.
Thank you, Your Worship, for your contribution. My contribution into this is I agree that I feel it's an excellent document, but I sort of take on board what Councillor Dalgety's cordial around potentially having something that is in the vision. To me, that's a whole lot of that's 10 things that we've got in there. That's and there are a whole lot of little statements of specific things. In my head, that's not necessarily, I wouldn't call them. I think it would be a great idea to have something that is a visionary statement that can still be, so that the staff are able to do what they need to, but actually for the community is able to see something in a short, punchy statement, as you've said, and I'd like us to look at both sides of this. You've heard the feedback from the councillors, and potentially coming up with something that may be able to go across all of it, not removing anything, but actually an end situation. And also I'd like us to think about potentially if there isn't anything to change within the document, or maybe there's just maybe an addition, whether or not that time could be spent. So at the end of the day, that will fall back to you and your team. But if no one else has got anything else to add into this? Yes.
Yes. If you don't mind. I just want to back up a bit what Arno said. This visual is actually really helpful for us as managers to our staff.
Yeah.
And I do, one of the reasons that we want to have a look at it again is it does need an update, but the concept itself is fine.
Yeah.
But perhaps some of the wording could be looked at. And also what we'd like to get to the stage of is that when councillors are asked, what's the council's purpose, what's your vision, that you can actually answer it. At the moment, you would struggle to articulate all that in the vision. And I think we don't want to take away from any of that, but I think working with other councillors and with Rhonda about how we could articulate it better to achieve both, but not really changing it significantly. Like I made the point this morning, we get a lot of compliments about this. It's been used as good examples by other people that have done work for us, and they're showing other councils how to make something like this visually appealing.
Yeah.
So we don't want to take away from that at all, but we just would love to get to the stage that if I said to you what's council's vision, that you could actually tell us what that is, and everybody's bought into the revision of it.
I
Through you, Madam Chair, I certainly accept when we came to do the council mark excellence review, and I said to councillors that they should be able to answer this as a fundamental question. The answers given were actually quite poor. People were wanting to look across and try and read it. And Councillor Mark picked up on it.
Yeah, so that's probably quite a telling thing, because if you had something that was short, sharp, strong rangi tika, I don't know whatever it would be, but something that was able to be just come out of your mouth because you know it. I mean, these are all of the things that make it, that's all the things that contribute into it.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. In my mind, there's one step missing in all of this. It actually has a feedback loop that we can go back and check those objectives that we have, because things change. And when we set this up, it was about 3 years ago, and ideally every year you just want to check that you're still aiming in the right direction. So if there's been a big change, we think of Three Waters, some of those might change or actually fall away, and then we just fix that up. And then again, it trickles down. We will fix our strategies and plans to reflect it, and the 10-year plan will ultimately change. So it's just that one step missing.
Well, does anyone else got anything to contribute?
Just on the Three Waters one, I notice in there's nothing about water in the vision, and we're spending $10 million on it.
I picked up
We've
on
got
that.
focus sustainably on the environment.
Yeah, that's focus on the environment, but that's not what our vision for our community is, that they
Have clean drinking.
have clean drinking water that it's clean and doesn't smell. And just some of the, I agree, some of the wordings are like diversify the horticulture and agricultural sector. Well, that's a big vision. Maybe it's, I don't know, help agriculture diversify or something like that, you know? Some of them are a bit lofty and some aren't lofty enough, I guess.
Thank you for that.
The AI.
Yeah, AI,
Which is good. That's
ChatGPT.
Worship.
I guess, yeah, when I relook at this, the only missing gap is nowhere does it seem to say that our district should be affordable. Or am I missing something here? We could want all sorts of things. Yeah, but if there's nobody here to enjoy it.
So just to say that I think that, again, by us being able to put our points of view across, it's going to give you some fodder to be able to go through and think about, potentially some at the beginnings of some work, because I think it's pretty much around the table. Nobody's got any problem with how it is. The framework of it is great. That doesn't need to get thrown out at all. That needs to stay. But if there's some tweaks that can be made, then we would expect that as staff, you're going to be having a look at those sort of things and be able to come back to us. And hopefully the feedback you've had around the table and Mia will help you on that. And I just want to acknowledge that, of course, the other whittle that was thrown out by the Mayor was potentially talking about if this doesn't need as much work put into it as, and it can be relatively simple, at that time could be perhaps put into the smoke-free.
I just made a point, it's not the same people doing it.
I know.
But so this was a recommendation that we received. We received the framework, the report. Can Councillor Duncan has moving a seconder, please? Councillor. Councillor Richard. Councillor Lambert. All those in favour, say aye. Aye. Kia ora, carried. Right, moving right along. Strategy, plan development and review update. And we are going to have this away.
Great, thank you. So probably one of the things that we didn't say earlier was the way that we've designed parts of this agenda is aligned with the discussion we had back in March. So the strategic framework was in there, the policy bylaw review schedule was in there, and this is another one that we thought could be a useful informative piece to make sure policy planning committee members are over all of our strategy and plan development work, and the other ones, you know, with that knowledge in council around what the program is. So also really happy, I'll run you through this, but also really happy to hear feedback around how this report works for you, how the format works for you as well, because we can adapt it to make sure it fits. So the purpose of this one is around our strategies and plans. So our core file that we've just talked about contains all of our strategies and plans. And developing clear strategies is really important for knowing where we're going as an organisation. And then the plans provide the detail around how to implement that strategy. And they're all influenced by the overarching hierarchy within that framework. So all of the strategies and plans is attached as attachment 1. What we've tried to do is provide an update of where each of them are at. Some of them are they're being done, they're adopted, they're just sitting there being implemented. The ones in section 3.2 are currently under development. Now, important to note, we've brought together all of the strategies and plans across council. So some of them are being developed through different teams. So the ones under development, we've got the community spatial plan, Arno's leading waste strategy, parks and open spaces and sporting facility strategy, the waste management minimisation plan, and then we've got our annual plan and long-term plans on the list there as well. So happy to answer any questions or take any feedback around how this report works for the committee.
Councillor Wilson?
Just a quick one, and perhaps for you, Anna, but with your parks and open spaces, one would assume that would encompass all and therefore would remove the separate individual ones that are listed on page, where are we? On the register, strategy planning register, for example, you've got Martin Park, Wilson Lane, Central Park, Memorial Park, Wilson Park, Duddings Lake, they're all management plans separately and individual. So is it your thinking that one park strategy would cover all of these?
That is a great question through you, Madam Chair. How it works is the strategy describes where we'd like to go. The plans give you the actions of how we're going to achieve that. And it's a really important distinction between those two, because ultimately, out of the plans, we then pull the information that ends up in the long-term plan and the annual plan. So in other words, the plan describes what are we going to do, and the strategy describes where we're heading with this activity. And that's the difference.
The main reason I raise that is because they adopted dates range from 2009 through to 2016.
Yep.
And there seems to be, I just was wondering, is that something that's going to be, will they all stay in place?
Yeah, they'll all stay in place.
Thank you. Councillor Moore?
Taking up on the mayor's pet thing today about the smoking, under the parks and open spaces strategy, could you kill two birds with one stone by looking at the smoking policies for our parks and recreation facilities as part of the management plan?
Through Madam Chair, it's two different things. Policy and the strategy is not the same thing. So the strategy just talks about the levels of service, how many parks, how does it look, where are we heading with it, how are we going to achieve all these goals. So it talks about the next 30 years and what we want to achieve in this activity. I think what you refer to is more activities and things that will happen on the ground. We need to put signage up and all those kind of things. So what we can do is in the plans, we can refer to something else. So national legislation, and then we can, in the plan, say we really need to put signs up in all our parks. And that might cost so much dollars, and that ends up in the 10-year plan. So that's kind of how it works. So yeah, we could refer to other things. National legislation might make that easy.
Just the thought, trying to, while you're planning, you might as well plan two things rather than one, maybe.
Thank you for bringing that kaupapa up, Councillor Moore. I'd just like to ask a question back to you. Within the, so you're talking about the, I understand that that's the strategy. Within the strategy, could there not be a smoke-free element within it?
Thank you for the question. I think it would confuse that strategy. That strategy speaks specifically to the activity of open spaces and sporting facilities. What it can do is refer or point to something else that might stand on its own somewhere else. But I wouldn't want to mix it two. It'll confuse both actually. That's why I kind of like we could consider adding some actions in the plan that we have to add signage or something like that. Yeah, but again, these things should be specific for the activity, I feel.
Okay.
I thought it'd be pretty specific, no smoking.
Yeah, but in a park strategy, it's a weird place.
Ka pai, anyone else got any other input into Ms Gray's report around this? Kaupapa at all? Councillor Duncan, anything that you'd like to
No,
add?
that's very good, thank you.
Councillor Lambert?
No, it's, you know, really,
Councillor Dalgety, have you got a comment? Any comments?
I'm going through the list, the heritage strategy. What is that in brief terms? Because I see it's overdue. Specified review timeframes. Because I've listened to Councillor Dalgety over the years, over 6 months, is about identifying some heritage buildings that are unique to Martin, and saying these are the ones we want to actually save and make sure they are looked after and not deteriorated, so that when they, so they might be already have occupancy in them, making sure that they're kept up to standard. I don't know. It's what is the strategy around heritage? Briefly, 3 points.
What I'd like to say to that question, first off, is that I don't think we expect to get the answers to everything immediately. And in order to get you a really good answer, if you need a really good answer, do we need to, unless you can answer it straight off, because I feel like sometimes we just a one sentence comes back and that doesn't necessarily satisfy what's being asked from councillors. But also, the other thing I'd like to ask is the question that's been asked to you by Councillor Maughan in your head, is that keeping in line with what this whole corridor is about? It's keeping in line with that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I can provide the advice I would give you without going through the whole of the heritage strategy is to go online and have a read of it. It is old and it does have a bit of history in terms of its review, but it's much wider than built heritage. It focuses on cultural and narratives and that type of thing as well. But certainly probably much overdue for review at this stage, but do encourage you to go and have a read of it. Happy to have a one-on-one with you as well.
Oh, right, that's great. Anyone else got anything regarding this, the strategy, the register, or anything that they'd like to bring up? Your Worship, is there anything that you'd like to bring up around this? No?
Sorry, I was dealing with another urgent issue. Sorry.
Carol, anything?
No, I was just going to say, it might sort of, surprise is probably the wrong word, but I'm going to use it because I can't think of another one. It might surprise you how many strategies and plans that we actually do have, and that we're required to keep an eye on and review and update. And so I think by this committee having the oversight of that, it does help that you understand that there are these. While our strategic core mentions some of them, there's a lot more in there than what's up there.
Councillor Deputy.
I'm just interested, for some of those strategies, for like the heritage one, it would be helpful to know when it is planned to be reviewed. Like we can see it's overdue. So when are we likely to be doing that, or is that not a known thing at this stage?
It's not currently scheduled. Maybe we come back to your next meeting with. Right,
if something is overdue to be done, I think it would be helpful to know, when it's going to be done, in my view.
And the question is whether it's one that we still need.
Right.
Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, just on that subject, and correct me if I'm wrong, Katrina, some of these strategies and bits and pieces we have will have mandatory requirement dates as required by government, but some of them will have our own internal review dates put on, and therefore they may not be quite as pressing as others, I should imagine, and I may be incorrect in saying that, but that's my understanding of our strategies. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. You'll see the column that says legislation, the ones that say non-statutory, meaning that any review dates associated with them are the ones that we've imposed on ourselves.
That's right.
It's the ones with legislation sitting under them that have specific review dates. So it's really none of our strategies have a firm review date, no statutory requirement for review, but the likes of our long-term plans and our annual plans do have statutory review dates.
Which should always be our focus.
Fantastic, excellent. I think does that answer your question, does that answer your question in a way, Councillor Delgatti?
No, so if.
The explanation around legislation and non-statutory.
Yeah, okay, so I believe we've got, some huge thinking around heritage in front of us. So I would have liked to have known when we would be actually sorting out that strategy. Yeah.
Okay. It's on the action list, it's coming back. The other thing that I'd just be interested to know also is that by using the word overdue, when you've just told us that actually it may not necessarily be overdue in the sense of legislation, kind of sense of red flag, and people are going to, you're going to go straight to something like that. But actually, if it's just because of our own stuff, maybe it's not as urgent as if we didn't use that word overdue. Maybe you would not have picked up on that at all. Yeah. Right. Anything else?
No, good.
Okay. So 9.2, recommendation that the report, strategy, plan development and review update be received. Can I have a mover, please? His Worship the Mayor. Seconded by Councillor Wilson. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carried. All right. Let's go. 9.3, climate change strategy and action plan. Kezia.
Hi. Sorry, my voice might be a bit bad. I've got a cold this week. So this was part of our Better Off funding application, and we just saw this as an opportunity for the committee to have input into the scoping document and what it's currently sitting at. And so I'll just take the report as read, and if anybody has any input or questions, go for them.
Okay, thank you for that.
Sorry about that.
Kezia. Has anybody got any feedback or any questions that they'd like to ask Kezia about this specific kaupapa?
Yeah, I've just been asked to do a little bit of work on this in terms of LGNZ. And the more I looked at it, the more I think it is split between climate change mitigation and climate change prevention, if you like. And in terms of mitigation, one of the things, for instance, in the area of managed retreat, I think I've still got quite a lot of thinking to do, but I think that identification of managed retreat, coastal areas is one thing, because we know that that's uninsurable, and we've got to do the same thing with our river networks to possibly a 200-year level flood. So I think that we have to go through our district and look at what things we are prepared in the future to accept as things that are going to actually happen, and have a retreat process around that. In terms of stopping the climate change aspects as they occur, there are things that we should do. And for instance, I've said prior to this that we should be writing into our procurement strategies that we should consider climate change as part of any procurement. So much the same way that a whole lot of council decisions we have to consider cultural iwi considerations, there should be another line in all of our decision making that says we should consider a climate change position. I think there's a whole series of things that we should accept and state for our council and the regional council that we fit into. One, the obvious one is that climate change is real, and two, that to achieve the Accord figures, that are national Accord figures, there has to be substantial change. That playing around with the edges is not going to work. I think that we could well come up with a prioritisation in much the same way that Manawatu works. So in Manawatu, you've got a limited resource, and you say that, for instance, the human life and councils have some priority over leisure, etc. I think the same sort of thinking has to apply to climate change. So if you look at some things that one end of the spectrum, food production, for example, is a given. We need to produce food to eat, and we need to produce food for the world market. On the other end of the spectrum, a lot of our climate change is driven by, for instance, the need to go on holiday and jump on a jet. And it's almost as though there has to be some sort of prioritisation of where we try and seek these gains. If the government was quite brave, they would immediately say, okay, any airfare in or out of New Zealand is $100 that goes on the top of that. I also think that the ability to trade out of being an exacerbator isn't an acceptable policy. So that Air New Zealand, for instance, by buying carbon credits from forestry, doesn't absolve them from their responsibility. There's a whole lot of stuff there.
Thank you, Your Worship.
They're parts of a paper that I'm going to string together.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Long way to go.
Yeah, so just to say, Councillor Dalgety.
Sorry, my point would be, I've no idea how you do it, do we know our greenhouse gas number? And until we know that, it's difficult to improve on that and see that we're improving on that. We don't measure it, whatever that saying says. So I think most businesses are going to need to know that, and we should set a good example to our district and find ours out and use that as a driver.
Great point.
Can I ask through you, Madam Chair, are you talking about a number for us as an organisation or us as a region?
No, I'm talking about as an organisation.
Good point. Councillor Duncan.
Just a wee typo on 2.4, but this is not my point. But there's just bottom of last 4 words is provide, develop the document. I'm really interested to see how we go about this, because what comes out of central government, what comes out of the Manawatu, Honganui, everyone else, all of that has to keep being incorporated into how we go about this, and it's an ongoing feast as far as I can see. I would actually like to go for us to have some sort of report over the last 2 years and to see what's actually happened, where the floodings happened, where the weaknesses, and I'm sure we've got all that data, and to look at the actual effects from more intense rain events or whatever within our district. So it's not just policy from here and ideas from there and whatever. I would like to see what is actually affecting our communities the most, and where are our weaknesses showing up already.
Thank you, councillor Duncan. Councillor Lawson, have you got anything to contribute into this?
Just hearing what councillor Duncan just said, there is some quite good, mapping technologies and scenarios and prediction forecasting, which can happen via certainly Horizons Regional Council, as to where scenarios like that can show where the different rainfalls happen and the different effects of different areas, because isolated rains will have an effect in one particular area. So I'm not quite sure if you could map it specifically, because historically would be difficult, I think.
Thank you. Councillor Moore, have you got anything to contribute?
No.
Councillor Lambert?
No, I'd certainly think going forward, a more specific type, wherever it comes down to knowing our greenhouse gas number, but something a little bit, instead of just nibbling around the edges constantly, having a bit more go forward, and it would definitely be a direction I'd like to see us go. Yeah.
Thank you. So just to say, from my point of view, Kezia, just listening to everybody, we can, I feel like this is something that's going to be on our, it's coming up to us all the time, the climate change stuff. And so just listening to what everyone said, in my mind, we've listened to Your Worship, the Mayor, talking about something that's more of a national space, and we've gone right down to local, talking about what's the emissions, greenhouse emissions for our very own little selves. And so it would be interesting, in my head, I see we've got some federal funding that goes around it. I would have thought that taking into consideration some of the feedback that's come from all of the councillors around the table, there may be some ideas that are in there. So I don't feel like we have to tell you what to do. That's not what it's about, but we certainly can give you some whakaaro and some ideas of what people have in their heads. Because I actually think that in a way that you're right, and Councillor Duncan, in regards to what has the effect the climate had, what has the effect been on our district? So we know what it is nationally, and because it's no, in my head, we need to kind of get away from worrying about what other people are doing and what's happening out there nationally. I know it affects us, but we should always stay focused on why we're here. And we hear about the Rangiteke, so, and I take on board, and I think that that's right, and agree with what Councillor Delgady's comments about something that's more localised. So maybe there's an opportunity in there somewhere in your workings to think about some of the comments that have come back. I don't want to necessarily say that we want this, because we also have to take on board the work that goes behind with our staff and what you've currently got. But if there is, this isn't a planning type stage, I would have thought that you would take that kōrero on board. Thank you. Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm pretty sure Kezia has listened to all that, and we can provide some further words in there. One of the things that is really important and why we want to get this strategy and action plan underway is this is a massive focus, both from audit, saying that they're going to be looking at what we're going to do from climate change, but also our community. They want us to actually have a plan in place as well. And that's why we did put the application in for Better Off funding, to allow us to get this information. And I think the scoping document, while we can tweak that, I think it will come down to who we can get to do this work for us, and then sitting down with them and sharing some of the ideas that you've just talked about to make sure that we can get it as wide as possible. So the first thing is to get the scoping document, find a couple of providers who may be able to give us a quote for the work, and then choosing them and going ahead with that. So this is just the very first part in this process.
Well, thank you, Carol.
There's a little bit of national direction in this at the moment, because, for instance, after Cyclone Gabrielle, a whole lot of red stickered homes, there'll be a joint buyout by councils and government. So do we tend to accept that as a position? I can think of a particular house not too far off State Highway 3 that has been flooded, to my knowledge, to ceiling height 3 or 4 times.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just I think it's important to note just, as for the stormwater idea, I'm taking a report to council in June that describes our plan going forward and what we're doing with stormwater and engineering and mapping to help all of us make really informed decisions about the effects, and over time that'll become a more colourful picture as we have events and we can accumulate all that data together. So it's a good timing that you brought it up because I'm creating that report for the June. So that's important. The other one that's really important, we started in January, February with a carbon credit plan to see how we can get on top of these numbers to understand what is our organisation's carbon footprint, how we potentially could zero that, and then even have some available for the market potentially. So we're working on all of that in the background. That will tie into the work that Carol is doing. But I thought those two, it's really important that you know that we are working on them. As we speak.
That's great. Has anyone else got anything they'd like to contribute into this space? Otherwise, I'm going to ask for a mover to receive the report.
One thing that plays in my mind a little bit in terms of the government buyout, and it's that moral issue of if someone's uninsured, then what happens? And especially if the government does choose to buy out, which I'm not saying is right or wrong, but then that is not encouraging people to insure themselves.
Yeah. This is, sorry, Madam Chair. This is what I was getting at a little bit in terms of mapping our rivers along the same principle as managed retreat from coastal areas. So if coastal areas, say a fair chunk of Dunedin, if it floods over sometime in the future because of sea level rise, they don't get an insurance payout. It's not an emergency event. And so that's uninsurable. And I suspect that we could go the same way with managing our river systems long term and say, we know that for instance, if you're within a 200-year or 150-year indicative flood zone, they're in the same position. What's the difference between these events due to climate change, coastal sea rise and river flooding? They're very, very closely aligned.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Just following off that, I was going to bring this up. The same thing, like if we identified repetitive flooding areas or prone things, and then people are advised either you don't build there, if you build there, you will not be insured. Like you'll get no, that is a flood prone area, and be aware that,
But they won't get a consent from
well,
a consenting team to build there to start with.
But even people already there, the same sort of thing, if you don't move, you won't get.
Thank you. All valuable kōrero. I just don't know whether or not this is it needs to be part of what this kaupapa is. But it needs to be somewhere. And then how do we put it into, and what committee does it go into where that can be fleshed out more? Because I'm sure that the other councillors that aren't around the table would have a point of view around it as well. So thank you. Councillor Duncan is going to move the report. Thank you for everyone's contribution. A seconder, please. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Lambert, with your hand up. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Kia ora. It's moved. 1.3. 10, discussion items. Right. Moving right on. Discussion items. Communications reporting. So,
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this item is really to basically what I've said, have a discussion with this committee about a couple of things, talk you through where we've got to in terms of our space in the comms area, and also explore a bit more with this committee around whether we should and how we could measure council's reputation. This is one area again that was raised as part of the council mark report, and I said at the time that when we have a comms manager in place, we will have a look at this and see what approach we could take. And just to go forward, where we came from was up to a couple of years ago, we used to do yearly resident survey, and those sitting around the table for longer than a couple of years will remember this. They came at a high cost, but with very little change in the results year to year. And just to take the 1920 year, we got 371 responses out of so many thousand that we send out and that we run. And in 2021, we got 267 responses. And those resident survey had 17 different categories. And within those categories, you had a number of questions, some of them 10, 20 questions within in each of the categories, which is probably one of the reasons that we didn't get as high uptake as we possibly would have wanted. So in 2021, we did take a different approach and we introduced a number of initiatives. We decided at the time not to spend the money on the resident survey, and we implemented the Happy or Not system, which you're all very familiar with at Martin Main Office, Martin Library, Taihape Info Centre, Library and Te Matapihi, and latterly in the Martin Swim Centre. And from that system alone, we get hundreds of responses each month. So, but that is people telling us whether they're happy or not, you know, along with some commentary. We also implemented the Korero Mai, have your say, the QR codes and the ability for people to jump on our website, provide direct feedback via QR codes at some of our key locations like parks and toilets, etc. And they are using that, as you've seen. We report that to the Finance Committee. So we are on a journey. We've made a huge progress. We're on a journey to get as much feedback and to make dealing with council as easy as possible. And I was in a civil defence meeting earlier this week, and there's some really cool ideas that our GIS system is creating, and we're really we will bring that through as soon as we've got more direction on that. But it's another system that both staff and the public will be able to send us photos and provide us feedback in real time. So that's used in the civil defence function, and Councillor Wilson will have seen that when we were in here a few weeks ago, but this will be available to be used day to day as well. So there's more happening. So I suppose I've asked Rhonda to sort of have a think about, you know, if I said to you, how do you measure council's reputation? Is what we're doing already enough, or is there other things that we could do? Or is there a specific question? I'm sure if I asked each of you, what do you think of council's reputation, and you went and asked your community, everybody would have a different opinion. So I'll leave it there, and I'll just ask Rhonda to provide a bit more context from her point of view, only being in here at 6 weeks.
6 weeks. So in regards to reputation, I have to say that having been here for 6 weeks, the growth that we've had in 6 weeks across our trackable platforms, as I was overtly enthusiastic about this morning, is huge, which tells us that we've got a good reputation. If people are coming to us and asking us for information, sharing our information, engaging in conversation with us, that's a really solid start. Have we got work to do in the space? Absolutely, and it'll be one of the things that I want to talk to you all about, as I mentioned this morning, what you see as reputation, what does a reputational council look like to you and the people that you associate with in your wards, and what you feel they'll respond to in that space. We do have a huge amount of engagement going on, but we need to be careful that we don't let it drop off as well. Engagement's only useful when there is a reason to engage, or we give people a reason to come back to us to feed in and out of what we're doing. So we need to keep that momentum going. And while we use a variety of platforms and a variety of means, like we talked about this morning, they're only good when people choose to use them. We can put out as much information over multiple platforms, whether it be skywriting or mailbox drops. If people don't want to read it, then they won't. So that's the space that we're working in, is creating information that's relevant, that's easily digestible, that's accessible, and that builds on council and who we are. One of the things that we would like to do is a reintroduction of you all. So in our Connect that you'll all be very familiar with, because you all read it every fortnight, we would like to do a Meet the Councillor each fortnight, along with a Meet a Council person. So somebody from a department in council and a spiel about what they do, and a councillor and an introduction with a couple of questions, a couple to do with work and a couple of personal questions. So that's probably enough burbling from me.
Discussion, councillors, any feedback from anyone?
Sounds like hard work.
Councillor Duncan?
Maybe your media training, don't feel
It just strikes me that this is a really good question, and it would be great to have this one where it says suggestions, ideas that could be used to contribute to measuring council's reputation. It's the first time it's really occurred to me that AI, chat, GP4, would be something really interesting if you put something like that in there and see what suggestions came back. Because we're all doing it, all 67 of us, or whatever that number is, councils, we all want to know this is such an important thing that we are engaging and getting good engagement by the community and good feedback. So I'd be really interested to do that myself. But reputation is something that we get, comes to me in the supermarket and at funerals. And it's a lot of it's around RFSs and the fact that the mayor's been up 3 times this week, that's huge, that sort of thing. I don't know whether that sounds shallow, but that's really the face of it for me.
Thank you, councillor.
Thank you.
Around. Councillor Lambert, anything to contribute?
Yeah, this is such a spider's web. This thing, it's like you tend to get. It's like when you go to a restaurant, and you don't have bad feed, you straight away on Facebook going, "Don't eat there, it's bloody awful." But you might tell your friends it's actually quite nice. It's the same sort of thing. It's like any feedback I get was like, "Oh, I went down to pay my dog rego and I should have paid a day earlier." But like bloody council sort of thing. But it's try to encourage the positive feedback. Like, what did you like about your experience? Because you're always going to get the negative stuff. It's trying to work on that, positive. And it's almost like, how could we done it better sort of thing, which is always a constant improvement. So, yeah, as I say, I find it a real, it's ironic in a world with that many different forms of communication. It's harder to get your message to and back to people.
Councillor Moore, anything
it's
to add?
No, I think I'm looking forward to Rhonda coming up with an awesome plan.
All of your input, councillor.
with our input. Yeah, with Greg's input, that'll get
I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you.
Councillor Delgett, anything to add?
For me, probably in my circles, roading is the biggest issue. But there's definitely a bit of it's just expectation that council are doing the best that they can, rather than anything worse than that. Yeah.
Councillor Wilson?
I'm just mindful that the All Blacks are only as good as their last one. And would just remind councils that they can fall from grace pretty high and still be winners. If they only win by 1 point, they can still be chastised for their win. So it's a difficult one. I think one of the key things from what I would see as success for any council is when you can turn an adversary into an advocate. And if you can do that, then that is a good measure of success.
Excellent. Your Worship, have you got anything else to contribute? Is that done?
Roading is the biggest issue. I would get more concerns over roading than everything else put together. Some of it's not our fault, but as carbon credit forestry is going to destroy us. It's just every single day I'm getting comments about road condition, where roading's heading, and that's the reality of the world we live in at the moment, or the world that I live in at the moment.
Hilda, thank you for that. So, has any staff got anything they'd like to contribute into this?
I'm scratching my
So what I'd like to say, to me, this is about, so you've heard the issues that individual councillors are having coming through the different spaces. This isn't in my head, that's not what this is specifically about at all. But you have heard the issues and how they're coming to staff. And so, as you've said, Councillor Duncan, I think it's a good, it'll be an interesting thing, and what a Kōrero will put out there and get feedback from not just people around the table, but from our community. And as we've said, and as we know, and it's been talked about in our earlier workshop, you can, what's that thing? You can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. And so, taking that on board, we will be positive, and as councillors and as staff, and feedback with our community, and keep putting the information out there as we need to, because the issues are just the issues. We're not, do you know what I mean? I'm not really talking writing. There's a multitude of issues, but actually, what's the process that we use in order to deal with it?
I just have one more question. If we do have some ideas, where do we feed them into?
In regards to community and engagement.
Engagement. Straight to you. That's all good.
That's great.
Thank you.
And just to say, I had mentioned that you were going to have one-on-one with each councillor. Yeah. Oh, well, if there's nothing else to, if no one else has got anything to talk about in regards to this discussion, because there is no recommendation from it. No.
Just discussion.
It's just a discussion. Before we draw ourselves to a close, I'm going to go around each and every one of you to see if there's anything else that you'd like to bring up. And we're going to start at the back with you, Kezia. Anything else that you'd like to bring up?
No.
No? Carol?
No,
Thank you. Sharon?
No, thank you.
Rhonda?
No, thank you.
Galen?
No, thank you.
Oh, no.
No, I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Richard? Greg?
Yes, just on Ko-Fi, just thinking back, roading wasn't in our strategic plan either, I don't think, like infrastructure in general.
Okay, so if someone can make sure that gets...
Water and all that sort of stuff.
Water bill.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But I'm formulating in my mind some feedback for you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, well chaired, thank you.
No, thank you for asking.
Your worship.
Thank you for asking, Kerry.
I really want to say I've got an extensive list here, but I don't. No, thank you for asking.
Yeah, fine. Oh, well,
Interesting. It's interesting to me how some of our communities are really, really good about finding solutions or assisting themselves, or contributing to builds or whatever. That is tending to drop off. You know.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, we're coming to a closing time. I got asked earlier before we started what time would this meeting go to. It's now 2:22 is our meeting closing time. I'd like to finish our hui with a karakia to close us off. He inui tātou, kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atawhai o tō tātou araki, a ihu karaite. Me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhena tahitanga, te wairua tapu, mo ake, Amen.
Amen.
Kia ora, everybody. Thank you to those online, and goodbye.
Bye.